You're listening to Leader Tribe, where leaders are made daily, but never in a day. We're talking skills that are relevant, researched, and ready for action. Apply these and you will grow. Here's your daily dose of growth with Dr. Rob McClelland.
Hello, Leader Tribers. How in the world are you? I trust you're doing fantastic. Dr. Rob coming to you from Atlanta. This is actually one of the final podcasts I'll be doing from Atlanta, probably the next week's worth and perhaps the week after that. We're moving to Dallas. If you hadn't heard that story, you can go back to last week's episodes, especially make sure to check out last Monday. And I attached pictures to the show notes on that day of my makeshift podcast studio. That's the same one that I am broadcasting from today. It's a piece of egg crate foam hung to the chandelier in my dining room to help with the noise reduction and to do the podcast. Hey, as promised, this week I want to do something much, much different than I've ever done before. But more and more I'm going to be talking about courage. I hope to write a book on courage. I've already talked to some people who would love to help get that published. And courage to me, it's something that each of us want more of or we want to have. But so often people think you either have it or you don't have it. And that's just not true. You can increase your courage. And the people who do turn out to be champions in life. They tend to be those people who are more mentally tough. I do not have this nailed down. However, there have been some instances in my life, and I have definitely worked on being able to show more courage. So what I began doing is researching it, but I want to start off just with the notion that courage has a lot to do just with vulnerability. How hard is it to be transparent, to be vulnerable, to share your weaknesses, your failures, things like that? But what we see in trust research is the number one thing that you can do if you're a leader to create trust in your followers is to actually be vulnerable with them, be transparent with them. And here's the thing, the leader has to go first. We saw that research from Kouzes and Posner. It was in a couple of their books. They touched on it some. The last 3 or 4 chapters of Leader's Legacy has to do with courage. Also their book, Teaching Leadership or Growing Leadership, which I just think is fantastic. They hit on it in there. The Truth About Leadership, chapter 7 or 8, they talk about leaders must go first. So I am going to be willing to go first. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have my wife on the podcast. She and I are going to sit down together and talk through things with our marriage, everything from vulnerability to failures to other things along those lines. But I thought I would start off this week a little bit different, just to kind of prep you for some of the things that you're going to be hearing. And so I'd like to do that today. First, just saying, what is courage? And courage, when it's defined at its root level, is really just, it's doing something, not just believing something, but doing something. And doing that, even if the consequences aren't going to be good, it's going to cost you something. Usually that would be some type of embarrassment or not sure how other people are going to react, but it's doing the next right thing, no matter what the consequences are. Let me give you a quick example. One of the things in our entire nation, one of the instances we've talked about courage would be Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, who did not give up her seat on the bus and moved to the back of the bus like she was requested to, because they said, hey, African-American people, you can't ride up here in the front of the bus. You need to move to the back of the bus. And she said, nah, I'm just not doing it. For a while, I'd read in many places, she had really said she was just tired. But she herself addressed that later and said certainly she was tired. It was at the end of a day of work. But that wasn't her primary motivation. Look, I'm too tired to move back there. It's like, this isn't right. And so she took a stand. It cost her something, but look what happened. Her showing that kind of courage began to rally other people, and we went into some of our civil rights movement and some of the amazing changes that happened in our country that needed to happen, beginning with Martin Luther King and some of the other great events that happened throughout our history to get us on the right track when we were on a very wrong track. Now, there are certainly some people who would say we're not even close to the right track yet, and our country has lots of issues. However, compared to where we were, oh my goodness. And you're talking to somebody who has some decent experience with the African American population. I think we've talked about that before. I was dean of an African American college at one time, so I certainly have done the research and spent time talking to hundreds and hundreds of people, and that's why I was so strong about the one race opportunity when we talked about that last year. Okay, so as we start to look at courage, I want to go right to our friends at Growing Leaders. That would be Tim Elmore and his crew. Tim writes on mental toughness and things that you can do to begin to prepare yourself to be more courageous, because it takes mental toughness. It takes somebody who's willing to step up to do the right thing in the face of adversity. He starts off this article. Hey, first of all, just let me say this. If you are a high school teacher, if you work with high schoolers, if you work with young adults, even a little after high school, and you are not part of growingleaders.com, you need to get over there. He writes absolutely the finest, the best material. He's certainly the John Maxwell and a bunch of others of that generation. So growingleaders.com, get on his free email list and you get his articles a couple times a week. He did one not long ago that had to do with mental toughness exercises for you and your students. And so it's to people who have students and for the students themselves. He thought of 8 different ideas to develop mental toughness. We've certainly talked in the past about the characteristics of people who have mental strength, mental tough people versus people who are more wimpy. And so let me go through his quickly. Number 1, waiting on something you want. I think the long time ago, Stanford exercises and Angela Duckworth's work on grit. In Stanford, remember, that's when they would put a marshmallow in front of a kid, and then they'd say, if you eat that marshmallow, then you just get that marshmallow. But if you'll wait until I come back, then I will give you 2 marshmallows. They studied those kids over the long haul and found out that those who had the mental toughness, who had the patience to wait, did far better in life. And then they came up with some things that you could do if you are given towards saying, I'll just take the marshmallow, thank you. How do you develop mental toughness? Number 2, it has to do with positive talk. Instead of saying, I can't do it, you have to be able to have a different conversation inside of your head. One of the people who's great in the coaching realm, her name is Valerie Burton. She talks about this. In order to be courageous, you have to have a different internal conversation. Number 3, persist on a project when it's something difficult to do or when it's hard. You know what, this is really hard. I think I'm going to go a different direction. No, hang in there, do the hard work. You keep doing it and you get to know yourself well enough so you can say, yeah, it's hard, but we'll get it done. And that's an attitude of a mentally tough person. Number 4, memorizing important information. It's one thing to be able to go to Google anytime you want and say, hey, I don't have to memorize it. I can get to it anytime. But something happens in your brain when you memorize things. And so if you have important quotes, important information, if you choose to memorize those, it helps you to be more mentally acute. It helps you to be a more mentally developed, tougher person. And so, friends, I just want to tell you that as we start to look at some of these, there's wonderful opportunities that we have to develop our own mental toughness. So, having said that, what are some next steps for you and for me? Number 1, ask yourself this. Is there an area that I'm struggling with, but I'm not telling anybody? I'm just choosing to hide it. I will deal with it. I'll deal with it myself. You know, once I shared a problem with somebody else, they blab to everybody. If you think that you can make it through life best, you can be the best you by yourself, friends, you're mistaken. There is no research in the world that would show that. At the very least, you're going to suffer when it comes to emotional intelligence. But the people who can find a loving community or get the help they need when they need it, those are the ones who are the champions in life. When we talk about people who have overcome great things, it's never, I just did it on my own. At least get the help to point you in the right direction. So that's one thing you can do is begin to get the help you need. And to do that, you're going to have to be more transparent, more vulnerable. Speaking of that, that's where we're planning to go in the next couple of weeks, especially when my wife and I are on here talking about our journey together and trying to model vulnerability for you, the Leader Tribers. Now, until we get there, I just want to tell you one thing. Every day, are you ready? Much love. I'm out. Hello, Leader Tribers. This is Dr. Rob. I might not sound like Dr. Rob because I've got quite a cold going, but wanted to kick off a new kind of podcast. It's still going to be part of your daily dose of growth, but this is really the story of a leadership marriage and how do you hold it together and how can you be really honest. My wife and I are going to do that. So I apologize up front for my voice. But today we really wanted to just jump right in sort of at the beginning. And so let me introduce my lovely wife, Dawn. And so, Dawn, what would you like to say to the Leader Tribers as we get going here?
Hey, we are so grateful for you for making this podcast a great podcast. I mean, there's lots of times when you would want to quit doing what you're doing, but Rob loves you guys, and he keeps going because he loves you.
You know, that's really true. The fact that we have over 50 countries that have downloaded it, and I think if I were sitting in a living room and it was a large living room and there was a bunch of people and there were 50 different people and I had the privilege to just sit there, I think I just said a bad word, to just sit there and talk to them, and they were from 50 different countries, just spend the evening teaching them some leadership things. I think that'd be one of the greatest nights of my life, right? And
right.
I get to do that every day. But we're having some transitions in life, actually transitions in marriage, not meaning we're getting divorced, as far as I know.
No.
Are you sure?
No, yes.
Okay, you're still with me?
Yes.
Boom.
Forever,
See,
forever.
that's what I'm talking about, Leader Tribers, the greatest day of my life right there, when this woman would stick by me. So we're in it to win it, baby. You can't just do,
Okay, I'm in it to win it too.
That's what I'm talking about. And we're transitioning, selling our house in Atlanta, moving to Dallas, and then going to up the game on social media this year. As a matter of fact, the lovely Regina, who I call Reggie, who is my virtual assistant and helps run part of my life and is going to run a lot more of it. She lives in the Philippines, but she is going to come over to the U.S. and live with us for a number of months. Talk about that, hon. How are you looking forward to that?
I'm looking forward to it, especially because it'll be fun to get to know her. We know her only on a screen right now, and I want to know her in person. She's a wonderful individual, and we are looking forward to that time just so that we can get some more work done. It just seems like the daily work doesn't get done that we would like to do to take this podcast and really Rob's image and what he really wants to do. I mean, he tells me all the time about his dreams, his hopes. There's millions of them out there, but he wants to focus on what he wants to do, what God wants him to do, and what is going to be best for you all to have you grow and us grow along with you.
By the way, Leader Tribers, if you hear some ambient noise in the background and little footsteps, that's because, as you know, we've sold our house. So we moved down to our basement level. Up above us are the two cutest little kids in the world, and they're running around. So if you hear foot stomping or something like that, that's what you are hearing. All right, so that's sort of a lot of just preamble. We're going to jump in for a few moments, and then we're going to end today. But we're going to start with kind of who we are before we got married, and we'll jump into this a lot deeper tomorrow, but I'd like to start with my lovely wife. So tell us about your life before we ever met, before you and I became the item that we are today.
Well, I grew up in a small town in Montana, a great place to live and grow up, but I always wanted to get out of the little town I was in. By the time I was 16 or 17, I knew I wasn't going to stay there. As much as I loved it and I loved the people, it was a great family life, great place to grow up in this little town, but I was always wanting more.
You know, that's so interesting because we've gone back to several of her high school reunions in her hometown, and we love it there. We love the people there. It's awesome. But even at the high school reunions, you can just look at somebody and you can tell which ones got out and which ones chose to stay there. And they're both right. I mean, it's what an incredible place it is, but for some people, that's just not going to be who they are. So what was it that you knew early on that wasn't you? Tell us about that.
I guess I think that I was able to see some things in my life, especially when I went right before I saw Up with People. When I saw them, I thought, there are people out there like me. When I saw that, that's when I decided I wanted to do something like that, was the first time I saw that.
Okay, most of our listeners have never heard of Up With People, so what are you talking about when you say that?
It's around still, but it used to be a traveling organization of about 100 people in one group that would sing and go to performances, everything from nursing homes to a cruise ship to actually halftime of the Super Bowl. I was in that.
My wife has been in the performing people at the halftime of a Super Bowl. Can I say I'm not worthy? So basically, it's this organization. They have people from all over the world, and it's a very people-centric, motivational, dancing and singing and saying, hey, we can all do this together. We're all human beings, almost like the old Coke commercial.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We
Very
are
similar.
the world.
Yeah.
We are the people, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, and it was an international organization, so most groups traveled overseas to spread the love, I guess is what you would say.
Yeah, okay. So that's where she was coming from, growing up in a small town in northern Montana, incredible town. And it's in the Columbia Falls is the actual town, but Kalispell, Whitefish, sort of up in that Glacier Park area. And man, do we love it up there. It's just fantastic. So that's just the beginning of Dawn's story, and we're going to follow up with that tomorrow. Let me tell you just the beginning of my story. I was actually born in San Diego, California, and my mom and my dad, they actually had one child before me, my older sister Shannon, who's awesome, but they had a rocky relationship. He was in the Army. She was an Army brat. They met overseas. And it was not necessarily the best relationship from the beginning. They did great while they were overseas. When they came home, it started to get pretty rocky, as I understand. And so last time I saw my dad, I was 1 year old, and my sister was 2. And some bad things happened, actually. My mom kind of, I think, went off the deep end because they got divorced. And even then, this would be 57 years ago, the custody of the children was given to the dad, which never happened. So that was how bad my mom was. So my dad had custody of us. He took a job where he had to drop us off at my grandparents' house. And then my understanding is my mom came and sort of kidnapped us from that house and then took us away. And it got pretty ugly for a little while after that. Now, I might not have that story exactly correct, but it's something along those lines. And my mom just was not a great person. My dad did what he could to try to get us back, but somewhere along the line just thought, this is so incredibly crazy. I just need to walk away from all that. And so he supported us, did everything he could, but he no longer was in our lives. And my sister and I were with my mom, and then she went on to her next husband and her next husband and her next husband. And so it was it wasn't the loving, stable relationship that you had, right?
Right. I was just thinking, it's interesting how much more you have to talk about your life. Mine was just pretty normal and wonderful.
Well, here's the interesting thing. She says mine was normal and wonderful. I think mine might just be as normal in today's world.
Yeah.
Yours would be the exception.
Right. Back
where you
then.
have, a mom and a dad, and they both work 8 to 5 jobs and come home and you have dinner as a family every night. Just doesn't happen anymore. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of my life. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up today right there. And friends, this is just the opening episode. We'll look forward to lots more and keeping it real with you. Leader Tribers, you're getting to hear the story and how we're going to be going back and forth. And it's going to get real. All right? So I think that's going to be it for today.
Great.
You ready
Sounds good. I'm ready.
All right. So why don't you do our closing today?
Much love. We're out. Hello, Leader Tribers. How in the world are you today? This is Dawn and Rob.
Did you love that, Leader Tribers? First time in the history, in 470 some episodes, you got to hear a new voice doing the intro. That's the voice of the lovely Dawn McClellan, my wife. And we're talking about trying to be real vulnerable in leadership marriages. And so we're going to pick up today where we dropped off yesterday. And that is in our childhood years. Hun, why don't you start? And so we know you're growing up in northern Montana. And what was life like? How did that leadership stuff begin to form in you?
I think the majority of that leadership stuff probably came from my dad. I remember applying for a job my freshman year out of high school that made me think, wow, I could actually be doing a boy's job, which no girl had ever done what I was doing, which was working for the parks department, mowing lawns, painting picnic tables, and my dad just encouraged me to do it. And
so hard labor type stuff all summer.
Yeah, not super hard. The hard labor came later, which is when I did boy job again at the aluminum plant. But my dad always encouraged me to go forward and forge new paths, I guess.
Wow. So you had a close relationship with your dad? Very
close relationship with my dad. Almost every night he had my sister and I on one side or the other, and we would just talk about our day. He was a very wonderful man and encouraged me to do my best at everything, even when I failed. When I came home with a D on my report card for math, he asked me, did you try as hard as you could? And I said yes, because I did. Mm-hmm. But that only yielded me a D in math. So it was no issue for him after that. So I had tons of grace, tons of love, just encouraged me to be the best I could be.
Wow. Okay, Leader Tribers, my wife is 60 years old, and she is talking about how incredible her dad was. This is 55 years later, 50 years later. And so there's a lot of us that might have regrets over our parenting. You can't go back. But there's also a lot of younger Leader Triber listeners out there. Listen to this. When you have kids, her dad would lay with her and her sister on a couch or on a bed, one under each arm, and say, let's talk about your days. What about this? You can do it, and encourage them. Tell me a little bit more about that, hon, because that's unbelievable. I mean, you're a very confident, accomplished person, and it sounds like it all started back then.
It did start back then. I think my dad just always asked questions, and that's how I became a question asker. That's why I am coaching people and mentoring people today, is because I love to ask questions about people and get to know them. And that's what my dad did for me, and it feels like love to me. So that's what he did. He was a big question asker and a very good affirmer of his love for me, no matter how I acted or did. I was a pretty good kid, though, so there wasn't a whole lot to not like about me.
Oh, my goodness.
My sister was the little rebellious one.
Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
My sister was a little bit more of just different from me, but we're still best friends today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, her sister's awesome, Susie. And Sue, if you're listening, you are the best.
You are the best.
Yeah,
Sue.
We talk about you all the time. And anyway, okay. Let's move on from that, because Sue's just a bundle of fun all by herself. Okay, so you had that, and then talk about your high school years, or how you started deciding if you were going to be a leader, not be a leader, any insecurities you were going through, anything like that.
Yeah, I don't really sense there was much insecurity in my life as I was thinking about that. Really, the only insecurity I had was math. As I've already said, that was a tough subject for me. But even in the sixth grade, I remember growing up as a clarinet player. I started playing the clarinet in sixth grade, and I was in sixth chair. But all the way through the whole year, I kept challenging one person to move my way up the ladder. And the very last day of school, I challenged the person that was in first chair because I was in second chair, and I won. And it didn't matter to me that I did it on the last day of school. I just had a goal in mind. I can't believe I had that goal in sixth grade to do that. I've just always wanted something to show that I could do something and prove to myself I could do it.
So what was it about proving? Why did you have to prove something to yourself?
I don't know why, other than I think just knowing that I could accomplish what maybe some of it is a little people pleasing. I wanted my parents to see, my dad to see that I could do this. He never talked about playing the clarinet or if I needed to get to first chair or not, but personal accomplishment as well as letting my dad know and my parents know that I was trying hard.
So you just wanted to show them you had the vim and vigor, as my grandma used to say, or whatever it takes to get after your goals. Leader Tribers, I think one thing that's interesting right there is she was goal-oriented in some sense, even in her growing up years. And why I think goals are important, some people might not be goal-oriented. Dawn is not a type A person necessarily. She's more of a type B person, but she's still somebody who, if you set a goal and accomplish it, the chance of you going on and accomplishing more and more and more in life is huge. And so even no matter where you are right now, young person, old person, if you're 67 years old, you're listening to this podcast, let me encourage you. Set a goal for yourself in the next 3 months. Say, I would like to be able to walk 5 miles without stopping 3 months from now, and then go out and walk 100 yards today. I mean, come on. Setting goals and accomplishing them, it does something to your brain and to your life. So, okay, anything else that you would like to share about the high school part or growing up years before college?
I think that basically in high school, I just loved to be around people. And I was kind of in the in-group in high school. My friends all got together once in a while, but I wasn't as inclusive as I should have been. I like to include people today because I see it's important for me to be included. And I wish that I would have been more sensitive about that. But that has formed a part of my personality today as a leader to seek out people that look like they're on the outside and they want to be on the inside.
Yeah, what's really interesting to me about that is in high school, you don't have as much chance to do that because if you want to be in the in group, usually the people who are around the fringes, they're not in the in group. You start inviting them into the in group and all the other people in the in group go like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
And so you can't stay in the in group,
True.
You know, so that's a little weird back then.
And you're a little more immature too. You don't look at life from that perspective when you're in high school. It's all about me in high school.
Yeah, we all spend a lot more time in front of the mirror when we were that age, didn't we? All right, Leader Tribers, a little bit on mine. I had basically the exact opposite of Dawn growing up in a very unstable, horrible family situation. As most of you know, my mom, she divorced my first dad when I was 1, and then she went on to the next dad. That was in Chico, California. What I remember about that dad in my life, his name was Harry, is they were fighting all the time. And I remember once seeing him pick her up and throw her into the wall. And I mean, as a kid, you're like, is this a TV show or like what's really going on? And then there's your mom bleeding, laying against a wall, and you run over to help her. And she's like, no, I'm fine. It's okay. Don't worry about it. And you're like, oh, okay, I thought that you got hurt, you know. And so, I mean, I was a really young age. This is 3 or 4 years old. And seeing this, it was pretty horrible. But I think what happened is my mom was messing around on my dad, even though he wasn't really my dad, and he found out about it. And so you add that to alcoholism and being a very poor family, and stuff happens. And so that's sort of where I came into this whole thing.
But I remember you telling me about another dad that you had that you really liked and some fun memories that you've had. Can you share some of those?
Yeah, that was my third dad, which was the guy whose last name was McClelland, who I've kept all these years. Isn't that interesting? Because my legal name would have been Robert Ray, but I've kept the name McClelland and had my name officially become McClelland. I think because that's where I was learning to write my name and a bunch of other stuff. But at least I remember with him, he liked sports. He was a drummer. And there were some really good memories. I mean, the bad news is he worked at a hospital out of town, probably 90 minutes from where we lived. And on days he was gone, not in the beginning, but towards the end, certainly, there were started to be other men visiting the house when he was gone, which I thought was a little weird. I didn't really understand what was going on at that age. And both he and my mom were deep into the leftover hippie scene, the drug parties at our house, bad people showing up to our house. Didn't really affect me as much as my little sisters. You have little girls, 7 or 9 years old or whatever they were at the time, and a bunch of freaked out partiers showing up at your house. That's a bad combination. And so I sort of, maybe that's where I got some of that protective gene stuff in me.
So tell me about when he left and when it was gone. How did that feel when the reality set in that he was gone and the best dad that you had so far was out of your life?
Yeah, what a great question. There's two things I remember about that were super, super, super hurtful to me. I'll share one of them now, and then we'll go with the other one. We'll pick up there tomorrow. Two things he gave me, and listen, both of them had to do with things that he gave me, and then when he left, he took them. And I didn't have much. And so when somebody ever gave me something, I never really felt loved, certainly by my mom, and she would have been the main person. So these husbands she's marrying into, they didn't have the same responsibility to love me. But for whatever reasons, when you look at the 5 love languages, mine is gifts, always has been. And so if I love somebody, I give them a gift. You know what? Maybe that's why I try to provide so much free stuff for Leader Tribers. I don't know. But when somebody gave me a gift, that's so meaningful. It's like, for me, really? And so I had a gun that he gave me. It was a 22 single shot little thing, but we could go out and do target practice type thing. And a set of drums. He was a drummer, so he gave me his old set. And I just started to become a drummer. When he and my mom were fighting, then I came home once and she said, he's not coming home anymore. And that was so upsetting to me. And then I went out into the garage and my things were gone. And so that really, I'm like, nobody loves me.
So it made you feel very unloved.
Yeah, I believe I was unloved. It wasn't just a feeling. Maybe my mom loved me in her way, but it certainly wasn't in a way that your dad loved you, or your mom loved you, something like that. So, well, Leader Triber is starting to get a little bit real here. We're going to pick up there tomorrow, and we'll go a little bit more through teenage and college years. Remember, we haven't even met at this time, but this is the preparation or who we are in our lives before we met to become the leader couple that we are today. And we're just trying to be as real as we can and take you through a history. We've never done this before, even with each other. And so we're having a lot of fun. Thanks for being along for the journey. Until tomorrow.
Much love. We're out.
Hello, Leader Tribers. This is Rob McClellan.
And Dawn McClellan.
And we are doing a leadership marriage podcast. Nothing like this has ever been done in the history of the world. Didn't stop us from giving it a shot. And so, hon, if I can ask you to move back about an inch, you keep coming in closer and I keep moving the mic. So okay. Go ahead and try from there. I'm talking.
How's that doing?
That's looking really good. So,
great.
Hey, Leader Tribers, congratulations. You are in on a sound check right here from the Leader Tribe podcast in the dining room of our home in Atlanta. We are actually moving to Texas. Most of you know that. And so we're set up in the dining room. If you want to see a picture of the setup, you can go on Facebook, facebook.com/Robster and look at my page. And there's a picture of it. It's really funny because we've moved in. I said earlier, we moved into the basement of our house, of the house that we sold to the people upstairs. It's not really a basement though, is it?
No, it's a lovely apartment with windows and a
9-foot ceilings and granite and a double oven,
fireplace.
Yeah,
it's
so
great.
Don't feel too sorry for us being down here in the basement. And this is the home that we built. It's our dream home, and we had other people staying down here, and now we're staying down here. And we will leave for Dallas, and we will arrive in Dallas when?
January 17th.
A week from today. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
We'll arrive there, so we'll start driving a week from yesterday. And so Dallas, here we come. And all you Dallas people out there, we're planning to be there for about 8 months, so hit us up. Okay, yesterday we left off with you were asking me some questions about my good dad. So as you can tell, I never had really a good dad. He was certainly the best dad I had at that time, but it ended poorly. And so during those years, he left, I think, when I was in 6th grade. So starting in 7th grade, had no dad. Actually, my mom got married once again when I was right at the end of my 6th grade year. So he must have left probably in 5th grade, maybe the beginning of 6th grade year. And she married a guy that I think that marriage only lasted a month or so. But I think they got drunk one night and drove up and went up to Tahoe. Here's what I know. I was at home with my sisters.
By yourself?
Uh-huh. And all of a sudden she was gone for 3 days. So if I was in 6th grade, that means my sister was in 7th grade. My little sister was in 4th or 5th grade. And we were just fending for our own. I was working down at the little grocery store at the corner, and they'd give me a loaf of bread for sweeping the parking lot. And we made out fine, but it wasn't a good situation.
No, not a good situation at all. It's so funny how I think about your life and what you do now as an adult as it relates to that kind of person. You just know how to get it done. And I think about that when you were little. You had training since you were in 6th grade to learn how to manage life. How did that feel as a growing young man and wanting to do well in school and other things, sports? How could you manage all that?
I just want to say, and we'll talk about our crisis of faith respectively, because that wasn't when we were together later, but I do want to note the way God wired me up. I was a smart kid. Mm-hmm. And so in school, could you imagine if I was doing poorly in school and all those other things? And so a kid going through all that, you think, well, he'd be terrible in school, right? No, I wasn't getting any love at home. So in school, I would try to do my best only because at least maybe a teacher would love me or think I was special. No one else did, except one of the neighbors' moms, who she was just incredible to me. But how did that feel? I think what you're going after is that sort of self-efficacy or pulling myself up for the bootstraps. And how did I feel about just being the kind of person who could get it done? I didn't think about it at that time. It was just survival.
Mm-hmm. Survival. Yeah, that's what
had
I was
to do the next thing. Mm-hmm. But certainly if you survive for 3 days and then you see somebody who's can't survive for 1 day, then you want to jump in and you want to go, oh no, you can do this. Come on, let's do it together and I'll help. And I had that there's nothing that you can't do. You just have to do what you have to do. Nobody wants to pay the price. But once you've had to pay the price, you had no choice but to pay the price. That was part of survival. Mm-hmm. Now you know you can pay the price. Now for the first time, it's just, do I want to or will I pay the price? Whereas before that, it would have been like, that's impossible. No, it's not impossible.
How did your sisters do in the midst of all that?
Not as well. My older sister, like me, we had the same genetic father. I was almost going to say generic father, but that wouldn't have been good. We came from the same gene pool. She also happens to be pretty smart. And when I say that, I just mean sort of on an IQ scale, type thing. We both have quite an aptitude for learning. And so she could survive, although she was too smart. She's off the charts on Mensa quiz and, things like that. And so because of that, unfortunately, even in 7th grade, she wasn't doing 7th grade work. She was doing high school work and having to do some stuff in high school classes. Well, now you have this vulnerable 7th grade girl going to the high school to take classes. Mm-hmm. And you can just figure out where that went. Mm-hmm. And so some of that was a little rough for her. She's awesome, though. I mean, she could fend for herself. No, it's not like anyone was just taking advantage of her. She was just probably, in my opinion, exposed too much to too many things too early, mm-hmm. which we all were because of the drug culture and everything else. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
and then your little sister?
Yeah. Came from a different gene pool and is below us as far as in school. She actually had to work hard in school. My other sister, Shannon, and I, it just came pretty darn easy. With Joyce, she really had to apply herself. I mean, I have so much love and respect for Joyce. I just can't even tell you. She's like a hero to me because all these things that came easy for us, they didn't come easy for her. And so she had to struggle and apply herself. And of course, we're kids at that age and we're like, come on, it's easy. Just do the work. And it wasn't easy for her. And then, later having a daughter where everything didn't come easy for her, I now see that I could have been much nicer to Joyce during those times. But remember, I'm struggling with my own self. I remember even me and neighbor boys being more interested in birds and the bees with Joyce and other, young ladies and things like that. And part of that was just growing up in kids, but thinking Joyce certainly appeared to have it rougher than Shannon and I. And she was a great kid, but struggled more and eventually went to live with her birth father. So she was gone in our home. And again, his name was Harry. And then she had some struggles in her earlier life. And again, now she's my hero.
Thankfully, we know the end of the story with her is great.
She's awesome. Mm-hmm. So at that point in high school, I had one goal, and that is to try to be loved by somebody. Mm-hmm. So
you mean a girl?
Well, a girl or parents or a teacher or, somebody tell me that they appreciate me. Now, I didn't know that's what it was at the time. All I knew is I was super motivated to achieve.
Right. Okay.
And
get noticed.
And get noticed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
how did that manifest itself? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think we probably should end it here.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of pick up with the final high school years and off into college tomorrow. And so we'll look at doing it that way. So the short answer was, well, I don't have a short answer on that one. But I want you to be ready tomorrow to be very vulnerable, because late high school years is where you're looking for love, even though you had it at home.
Yeah.
And what did that look like as you're preparing to go off to college? And then how about freshman year in college? How's that for a crazy year?
Yeah.
There's all these upperclassmen. You can go do whatever you want with whoever you want. And you want to do it, but you want to respect yourself and respect others. So that's a crazy time, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And neither of us were Christ followers at all in those years. So we'll share some of that with you tomorrow. And so until then,
much love.
We're out.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Leader Tribe podcast. For all the free bonuses and growth articles, join the tribe. It's free. Just head on over to leadertribe.com to sign up, and we'll see you tomorrow for another daily dose of growth.